This is a 1993 Alfa Romeo RZ, and it is one of the strangest sports cars of the 1990s. That's partially because of its looks. As you can see, it's not exactly a traditional looking car. In fact, nothing about this car is traditional, and today I'm going to review the RZ and show you what I mean. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website with cool cars from the modern era. And big news, Cars and Bids is celebrating its 1-year anniversary, our first birthday. And to celebrate, we're giving away free listings for the entire month of June. If you submit your car for sale on Cars and Bids, use the discount code BIRTHDAY to get a free listing valid the entire month of June on Cars and Bids, celebrating one glorious year of Cars and Bids, the coolest car auction website with the best cars from the modern era. Check it out, carsandbids.com. I've borrowed this car from a viewer here in the Los Angeles area, and I'm going to start with a little background. Now, back in the 1980s, Alfa Romeo had a sports car. It was called the Spider. It had been in production for a long time. It was well known and well loved. But Alfa wanted something more exciting, more thrilling, more head-turning that would get people talking. So they created this. As you can imagine, it certainly got people talking. A coupe version came first. It was called the SZ, or Sprint Zagato, and it debuted in the late 1980s. Strangely, this car was not designed by Zagato, which is known for their design work. Instead, it was built by Zagato, but designed by Alfa Romeo. So I had the whole process backwards there. Anyway, a few years after the coupe came out, they debuted this, the convertible version, which they called the RZ, which stood for Roadster Zagato. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. Zagato was nearly bankrupt, and the factory closed down after building just around 1,000 coupes and about 250 convertibles like this one. All SZ and RZ models used a 200 horsepower V6, a 5-speed manual transmission, and rear-wheel drive. And although these were never officially sold in North America, they are now old enough to legally import, so they've started to trickle in, with prices for nice ones approaching $100,000. That may seem like a lot of money for a curiosity, but oh, what a curiosity it is. And today I'm going to show you everything. First, I'm going to take you on a thorough tour of the RZ and show you all the quirks and features of one of the strangest modern Italian cars. And that's saying a lot. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give the RZ a Doug score. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the RZ with probably its biggest quirk, and that's saying a lot. That would be its design, its styling. This is a very strange looking car. You start up front with these weird 6 headlights and the Alfa grille, which just doesn't integrate all that well, this flat hood, and then you have this rising belt line that just rises and rises and rises to the back of the car, where it then just stops abruptly. There's no good ending, there's no beautiful tie into the rear. It just ends like a block, like a square, like an SUV, or frankly a pickup truck bed. It just stops back there. Certainly doesn't have the lines of a beautiful Italian sports car like you think when you think Alfa Romeo convertible. This is not what originally comes to mind. It certainly doesn't help that you have that rear wheel kind of inset, a little narrower than the body, which gives the effect of making the car look plump or chubby, kind of a little too wide for the platform that it's on. Not a good look when you already have some questionable angles. Speaking of angles, undoubtedly the worst is this rear 3/4 view where you have the square block at the back of the car just staring at you. It really does not look all that good. Amazingly, I think the coupe, the SZ, actually looks worse. You can see it here. I'm not exactly sure why. Can't quite put my finger on it, but something about adding a roof to this car just doesn't do it any more favors. It's just a really non-attractive vehicle, frankly. And it's not like this car was part of some design trend at the time. In the 1980s, you had wedge-shaped sports cars, which this isn't. And then in the 90s, you had flowing curves. Nobody was really building blocky, humpback convertibles and coupes, but Alfa was. But anyway, let's move on, because with the RZ, the quirks just keep on coming. I want to start with getting in, and I have to say I love the key. You can see the Alfa key has a clover on it. That was an old school Alfa symbol back from the brand's racing days. It was a good luck charm, and it's funny that they've carried it through even to the modern era, but I like to see it on the key. Once the car is unlocked, you walk up and you can see the door handle's a little unorthodox. You put your hand into this indent in the body and pull on this piece, and that is how the door opens. Definitely a strange handle. Now, once you have the door open, you can see it doesn't really open all that far. This is this car's doors fully and completely open as far as they go. Why not make them open further? I'm not really sure. It's just the decision they made. One of many questionable decisions. But if you want to talk about a non-questionable decision, here's something I love. When you open the door, you have Alfa Romeo printed in the door cylinder, and it's like embossed into the bodywork. It looks really, really cool. I wish more cars went to such great lengths to make you pleased with your automotive manufacturer when you open the door. It really does look cool. But anyway, we get inside the RZ, and there are a lot of quirks to cover here, but I want to talk about the roof procedure because it stands out as an especially bizarre one. Okay, I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out how to put the roof up or down, but then I found the owner's manual. Now, one surprise here, the owner's manual comes in an RZ leather pouch. They only made 250, 280 of these cars, yet they managed to print up specific pouches just for the RZ, not something that was shared with the SZ or a general Alfa Romeo pouch. I find that very odd. And when you open it, you can see the actual owner's manual, again, is specifically intended for just the RZ, not the SZ and the RZ, only the convertible. That in itself is kind of a questionable decision because I'm sure it cost a lot more to make specific manuals for just 250 cars, but it's the decision that Alfa Romeo and Zagato decided to make. But anyway, you open up the owner's manual and it is surprisingly helpful in teaching you how to raise or lower the roof, except for the fact that it's all in Italian. With that said, just from the pictures, I could clearly tell it had something to do with this switch in the center console, which, by the way, is unlabeled. There are 5 switches in the center console, 4 of them are labeled, but the one that has something to do with the roof, that one completely unlabeled. They decided not to stick any sort of diagram on there letting you know what it does. Smart thinking, Alfa Romeo. But anyway, I was pressing and pressing this button and it wasn't doing anything, and I just couldn't figure out what the problem was. So I texted a picture of this owner's manual to my friend Filippo, who speaks Italian, and he said, you gotta start by turning off the car. Now, this is a manual convertible top. There's no power involved, but for some reason, even though it's a manually operated top, the car can't be on when you do the top procedure. Anyway, turned off the car, pressed the button, and instantly this little cover in back popped open. So I knew I was on the right track. From there, there's a little release to actually open the cover and access the top. Where is the release, you ask? Behind the driver's seat. And you can't access it with the driver's seat in this position. In order to actually get to the release for the top, you have to fold the driver's seat back forward. So how do you do that? Well, the seat folder is on the inside of the seat next to the center console. You pull on that and that folds the seat forward, even though every other car with a folding seat back in history has this latch on the outside of the seat. Not the RZ. You have to reach in and fold the seat forward. But anyway, once you've done that, then you can access this little tab you can pull, and that will release the roof cover. But it is worth noting at this point that in order to put the roof down in your car, you had to not only turn it off, but fold the driver's seat forward. So you're sitting at a stoplight and you're like, it's a kind of a sunny day. I wish I had the top down. You can't just put it down at the stoplight. No, you have to pull into a parking lot, turn the car off, fold the driver's seat forward, and only then can you access the top. This this is high quality design, let me just tell you. But anyway, once you've gotten everything into this position, you've released the cover and back, you've pushed on this little tab, you can open the rear cover, and that reveals the convertible top. Finally, you have gotten to this point where you can put on the roof. And from there, it's a pretty straightforward process, although there are still a couple of little interesting quirks. To start, you basically lift the top out of the top area, and then you fold it forward, and then it meets the windshield. All this is pretty much as you probably would expect, but there is a bit of an issue, because how do you close this rear cover and drive the car if the top is in this position? Well, after you've already folded the top all the way forward, you then have to fold this back piece up so that you can get this cover back down in place, and then the back part of the top actually latches on to this rear cover, and then it's locked in place. And from there, you're still not done. There are little tabs that you have to get in place in order to lock the top onto the windshield, and only then is the roof completely in place and you're done. Then you can put the driver's seat back, turn the car back on, and drive away. What should be a simple manual top process takes like 2.5 minutes. And once you're done putting the roof on, you can clearly see from this angle, the car doesn't look any better with the top in place. In fact, in my opinion, it looks decidedly worse with the top up than with the top down. You've just made an ugly car uglier, although now you do have some protection from the rain and the sun and whatever. But it is certainly not a good look with the top down, and it is really not a good look with the top up. Now, I'm gonna put the top back down, but I'm not gonna go through every little step of the procedure. It's basically the same thing in reverse, and it just takes forever. You don't really need to hear all the steps again, but you can watch me do it. But anyway, aside from the roof and the design, this car still has a lot more quirks and features to cover. I'm going to start in here in the center console. Now you can see the space between the seats is painted red, and it kind of brings one line down from the rear deck lid in through the center console, all body colored, and it looks pretty cool. Strangely enough, this middle piece with the speaker on it can fold down. I have no idea why. It doesn't open, it doesn't really do anything. I guess maybe it could be an armrest? I'm not really sure. But you can fold it down if for some reason that's something you decide you want to do. Next up, another interesting quirk in here is the climate vents. You have two vents in the center like most cars, but then you have two over on the side, and then you have two over on the other side, right on top of each other. So you have 6 total climate vents in this interior, even though this is a very small 2-seater vehicle. Not sure they're all necessary, but they're all there. Next up, another notable item in the center console. You can see on the left side you have 2 switches with like a shock absorber. That is to control the suspension. The suspension system in this car was borrowed from a race car, an actual IMSA race car, and so you could dial firmer or more comfortable ride depending on the type of driving you were doing with these little switches. That was pretty forward thinking for the time period actually, and it's interesting to see them there. And in that vicinity, next to the suspension switches, you have a little plaque that reads number 130 RZ. I guess that's because this is the 130th RZ built. Now, like I said, they didn't make many of these. Zagato built about 250 before they went into receivership. They had no money. And then the receiver built an extra 30 or so. I'm not exactly sure how, with the same workers, cobbled together with parts. I wouldn't want one of those cars, but this is relatively in the middle of production at number 130. And I guess each car got a numbered plaque letting you know which it was. And for our next quirk, quirk, we move on to the climate controls, which are extremely bizarre. To start, you have 3 big dials. Nothing weird there. A lot of climate control systems have 3 dials, but they don't do what you'd think. The one on the left directs the airflow, pretty standard, but the other 2, one controls your heat and one controls your cold air. So you could theoretically turn the heat and the cold all the way up at the same time. Almost every other car has these on separate dials. You have to choose one or the other, but not the RZ. You can do both. So the question, of course, is what happens if you turn up the heat and the cold? Which does it prioritize? I have no idea, and I have no idea why that's even a possibility. Another weird thing about the climate controls is that printed on the faceplate for the climate controls is a diagram showing the climate controls. You can see the 3 big dials on the left and then the 2 little ones on the right.
You'll notice right below this diagram, there's a little windshield defogger icon here. This diagram shows the precise position that every single control must be in order to turn on the windshield defogger. In most cars, you push a button to turn on the defogger. In this car, you want the defogger, you gotta turn 5 dials to the exact right positioning. Smart.
Next up, an interesting quirk over on the passenger seat. You can see there's this little loop sticking up from the seat bottom. That is a grab handle. If your driver is going really fast and you're getting scared, you grab onto the door and you grab onto this handle in your seat and you hold on for dear life. That's an interesting placement of that handle. Speaking of driving very fast, I love the steering wheel in this car. It looks like an old school racing car steering wheel. It has a nice look, a nice shape, a nice feel to it. In the center, you have the horn. You push it and it sounds strangely a normal sounding horn. Take a listen. That is just about the only normal thing in this entire interior. And that point is driven home when you start to consider storage, because there is pretty much none in this vehicle. You do have a glove box, but as you can see, very minimal. You can't get much more in there than like an envelope with your registration paperwork. You don't have storage in the center console. You don't have storage on the door panel. You don't have storage pretty much anywhere else. But you're probably thinking, well, that's okay. This car has a gigantic square rear end, so it has a huge trunk. And indeed, there is a trunk back there, although the only way to access it is with this little switch next to the driver's seat. You push that and the trunk pops open. There is no latch in the back in the trunk area. There is no keyhole to release the trunk. You have to walk up, walk into the car, press this little switch, and only then can you gain access to your trunk for your cargo. But don't get too excited about your cargo space just yet. It turns out when you get into the trunk, first off, it folds open like this. It's hinged at the bottom. This is how you open the trunk. And when you open it, it only opens this far. This is as far as it goes. The only trunk opening you get is like 8 inches wide, which would be a problem except for the fact that this isn't actually a cargo area at all. You can see back here, you have the spare tire mounted here and some miscellaneous wiring, and that's all. There's no room to actually store cargo in the cargo area of this vehicle. This is not intended to be a trunk or a cargo area in any capacity. It just opens so you can access the spare tire and wiring if you need to. So, like I said, to reiterate, there is no cargo area in this vehicle pretty much anywhere, except, of course, for your glove box. Now, with that said, I will say if you push the front seat forward, you could store stuff behind the front seat and sort of below the resting position of the roof when it's down, but that's not really an official spot, and I could see stuff rolling around back there and getting lost. Nonetheless, it pretty much is your only storage opportunity if you want to load any luggage in this car, unless you want to use the passenger seat. But anyway, since I'm on the outside of the RZ, let's talk quirks and features of the exterior beyond just the overall design. First, let me close the trunk. First off, I want to start with the badge, which, as you can see, RZ, a red badge on a red car. Interesting, a little bit unusual and kind of strange, but nonetheless, that's the choice they decided to make. I wouldn't have done it myself, but one thing I do love is on the wheels, you can see the valve stem caps have the Alfa Romeo Clover again. They didn't go all out with Clover logos, which would look tacky, but they put them in these little places, and I love when they pop up. Now, another interesting item back here is the taillight situation. You have this giant tinted light bar across the entire rear of the car, and you can see this includes the brake lights, the turn signals, and in the middle you have the reverse lights. This is where all your rear lighting is. A blocky square rectangle thing perfectly fits the blocky square look of the back of the RZ. And speaking of unusual lighting, the front of this car certainly qualifies. You have 8 individual lights up here, 4 on each side, which contributes to this car's strange look. Although I must say it has a bit of a Bugatti Chiron vibe, which has sort of a similar lighting pattern. The RZ had it first, although the Chiron has it better. Anyway, as for these lights, on the outside, of course, you have the turn signal. Of the 3 inside lights, in the middle, you have the parking light. On the outside, you have the regular headlights, the driving lights. And on the inside, you have the high beams, each separated into their own special area to create 8 lights in the front of this car. And next up, since I'm in front, let's talk engine. We're gonna start with opening the hood, which is a little bit weird. To start the process, there's a latch in the driver's footwell, like basically every car. Then, next, you have to stick your hand into the Alfa Romeo grille in order to unlatch it in front. Once you do that, it is a very heavy piece. This is a large, heavy hood. You open it up and there is a hood prop. Now the prop looks like it should go over here. You can see there's some damage from people trying to put the prop in that place over the years, but that is not actually where it goes. Instead, it goes right in the middle to balance the hood so it doesn't sway to one side and potentially bend, and then you have access to the engine. This is Alfa Romeo's V6. It was called the Busso V6, and it powered an enormous amount of Alfas and Lancias and other vehicles from the late 70s to the early to mid 2000s. There were various different sizes of it, evolutions, changes. They turbocharged it at one point, but this engine got into dozens of different vehicles, and it basically kept Italy running for decades, this V6 powertrain. And here it is in the RZ. Like I said, makes about 200 horsepower, not a huge figure, but then again, this isn't exactly a huge car, just an ugly one. And finally, one other interesting quirk under the hood here. You can see in the very back there is printed a blue Z. That is the Zagato logo. Again, Zagato built this car, and there's not a lot of Zagato logos throughout, so it looks like they signed it there, trying to make someone somewhere aware of the fact that they built a car, but it looks like they signed it in like hand-drawn paint, like the kind of thing a child would do after finishing artwork in the 4th grade, but there's a Z for Zagato. Now that brings me to one of this car's strangest things, which was its production process. Like I mentioned before, Zagato built it, Alfa Romeo designed it. And that's really weird because Zagato is known for their design, and Alfa, of course, is a car manufacturer, so you'd think they'd be the ones to build it. But they flip-flopped it for this car, and so Zagato is always blamed for the appearance of this vehicle because everyone knows they're associated with it, but it wasn't really their fault. They only had some say in the design. They simply built it, and then they went bankrupt. And so those are the quirks and features of the highly quirky Alfa Romeo RZ. Now it's time to get this out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the RZ. I have always wanted to experience one of these and check it out, and I'm thrilled that I am today. First thing I notice, my eye line is directly looking at the windshield frame. Not really the best design. I have to either go under or over, frankly, actually works, but straight ahead doesn't really work. Now on the surface, 200 horsepower V6 probably doesn't seem all that powerful to you, and that's correct, but this is not a big car. I can reach to the end of it, frankly. It's really a tight little small car, and so it doesn't have a lot of stuff to move around. And this particular one has only 15,500 kilometers, I assume, and so it's not exactly worn out or anything. You're really gonna be able to feel how much power that delivers. It's actually kind of fun. Great gear action. Shifter, clutch, feels really good. There's some play on the shifter. The clutch is a little vague, but for a car from this era, I'm actually really impressed. One of the better 90s clutch shifter situations I've driven. Then again, it's important to remember Alfa knew how to make sports cars back in this period. The Spider is still regarded from this era as one of the coolest sports cars. And so this car was just sort of an even more exciting and more thrilling Alfa sports car. It's actually surprisingly fun to drive. Now, I admit it doesn't feel powerful. I was thinking, oh, 200 horsepower in a car this size, like I mentioned before, oh, it's gonna be fine. It's fine, but it's not incredibly fast. But that wasn't really Alfa's thing. The Spider was the same way. The cars weren't intended to be fast. They were just supposed to be fun. It's actually kind of funny because I've thought about this car a lot over the years. It's one of the really weird, quirky 90s cars. But I've never really thought about what it's like to drive. I always think, why does it look that way? Why did they style it like that? But now that I'm in it, it's actually kind of fun. And one of the other big benefits of being in this car is you don't have to look at it. The real benefit, though, is certainly in the handling and the steering. It is a tossable feeling car. Easy to rev up the engine, it revs pretty quick. I'm surprised. I'm actually surprised. I always just assume, this car is only famous for how it looks and how quirky and bizarre and weird it is and all the stuff I showed you before. That's what everybody knows it for. What nobody talks about with this car is how it drives. I think that's because there are so few, not that many people have driven them, but everybody's seen one and laughed at it. But in all honesty, I think it drives pretty well. It's not that fast, but it's fun, it's tossable, it's responsive. It's a cool little toss-about roadster. And I think that was what Alfa was going for, something that was more exciting, more thrilling, faster than the Spider. And they certainly did that, and this car is a lot more dramatic, although maybe not for better. One last interesting tidbit with these car values are definitely going up. Even though these were definitely the ugly duckling Alfa for a long time, they just didn't make that many of them. And in today's world, special cars, low production cars are becoming more and more sought after, and they're finally becoming legal in the States. So people here who want something a little different from every other Italian car, from stuff their friends have, they're starting to gravitate towards these. The owner of this car has a Lamborghini Urama, a Ferrari Boxer, a lot of cool special 70s, 80s type cars. And he also has two of these, the convertible and the coupe. He's a designer, and he told me this was kind of a moment in time that he felt like it was worth having, and he really wanted one for years, and now that they're legal, he's pursued that. There's not too many of them, but they're starting to trickle in, and they're starting to get more expensive. And so that's the Alfa Romeo RZ. This is a weird and interesting and quirky car, and I have always wanted to check it out. This car certainly won't win any awards for its beauty, but for people like me who are into weird and unusual oddball cars, this is one of the holy grail, right up there with the Aston Martin Lagonda and the Vector. And now it's time to give the RZ a DOUGSCORE.
Starting with the weekend categories and styling, this is weird. I like it, to be clear. I think it's charming weird, but man is it weird. And for most people it's weird verging on ugly. It gets a 4 out of 10. Acceleration does 0 to 60 in 6.9 seconds, and it gets a 2 out of 10. Handling is good, actually surprisingly so, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Fun factor is also higher than I expected. It drives nicely, and it's a fun experience with the roof down, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Cool factor is higher still. These are head-turning and very exciting to car enthusiasts. This would certainly draw a crowd at Cars and Coffee, and it gets an 8 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 26 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. It doesn't have much, and it gets a 2 out of 10. Comfort is fine, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Quality is okay. The interior is acceptable, I guess, but reliability is obviously a concern given its age and alpha-ness, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Practicality is low given the 2 seats and the trunk situation, and it gets a 2 out of 10. Finally, value, and these are more expensive than you think. Figure $50,000 to $70,000 for a nice one. That's big money for a questionable looking car with relatively low power, but at least it can be expected to hold its value reasonably, and it gets a 6 out of 10 for a total daily score of 19 out of 50. Added up, and the DOUGSCORE is 45 out of 100, which places it here against, well, I don't know. The RZ has no competitors. This is the closest stuff I could come up with. I have no idea if it does badly or if it's just the wrong competition, but here's where it scores. What a bizarre vehicle in the best way possible.